Samsung. Okay, they are doing some of the coolest display development right now. Quantum Dot OLED technology is amazing. We did a sponsored video for them around the time of CES for Samsung Display, which, by the way, is not the same thing as Samsung Electronics. So we worked with Samsung Display. We hung out with those guys a little bit at CES. I shouldn't say hung out. We went to their booth. We went to their booth at CES. I genuinely, like, I would have been happy to make that video without a sponsorship check. I don't even care. I love this tech. It's so cool. QD-OLED, amazing. Samsung Electronics, what are you doing, bud? They announced their upcoming OLED TV lineup. But for unknown reasons, the company has apparently chosen not to state whether a given television uses a Quantum Dot OLED panel, the kind that Samsung Display makes, or a WOLED panel, the kind that LG Display makes. OLED. While all of Samsung's high-end S95C TVs will be QD-OLED, its mid-range S90D series will apparently be sometimes QD-OLED and sometimes WOLED. Samsung has previously heavily advocated for quantum dots, both for color purity and for avoiding burn-in, which appear to be very legitimate advantages of their technology. Yep. But according to Korean media outlet The Elec, Samsung has decided not to explicitly advertise their TVs as QD-OLED due to a request from LG Display not to position white OLED as inferior to QD-OLED. What the actual is going on? I put this in as a topic because I get so flipping upset every time a brand obfuscates the underlying technology of what's being used with a deceptive naming scheme. And we've seen this time and time again. Remember when, very recently, AMD, not very recently, on an ongoing basis, AMD has created a different numbering scheme for their mobile processors compared to their desktop processors so that you can't compare across generations and know what exact So you can't look at both of them and know what generation of Zen architecture they're using, even though traditionally the model number has gone up to correspond with a move from Zen to Zen Plus to Zen 2 to Zen 3 to Zen 4. And I'm trying to think of some other really good examples of this. I mean, NVIDIA's had some GPUs where you might get one architecture, you might get another one, and the performance characteristics can be different across them. We've seen from... I'm trying to think now. I'm pretty sure Intel has pulled this nonsense at some point or another, where at the low end they were using like a previous architecture, even though it had the same like family name in the branding, like the same generational branding. And it drives me absolutely crazy because I don't imagine, right? I don't imagine for a second that when I buy the low-end product, I'm getting exactly the same thing as the high-end one. I mean, sure, if I buy the, whatever 90 instead of the 95, I might be getting lower-end processing. I might not be getting as many HDMI inputs. It might not be available with the same degree of anti-glare coating technology or whatever. But if I'm buying this generation of product, my expectation is that I'm getting the low-end version of that, not that I'm getting a completely different thing. Yeah. And I don't think that that's an unfair expectation. I think that that should be a baseline expectation. Yeah. And that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Discussion question is, if customers are getting an equally good product, does it matter that they don't know or understand the difference between two products that are being sold as the same thing?
But that's the thing. They are getting an also good product. WOLED has advantages. When we're talking pure brightness, okay, WOLED can achieve higher highs, especially on white. And you know what? A lot of your specular highlights, a lot of your pinpoint stars, or whatever, a lot of the things that are really bright in the scene happen to be white. And so they can achieve
Even something
really
like fire, like the really bright points of it might be white.
they can achieve really amazing performance in HDR, which is how we're evaluating the latest generation of displays, because they're all going to do a great job of SDR anyway. So we want to see how well they do in HDR. Also, LG's own TVs. So again, LG Display, LG Electronics, not the same thing, but LG Electronics displays, as we saw when we checked out that Flanders Scientific display, can do a great job, even though they have inferior panel technology when it comes to color brightness, because that's the thing that QD OLED does so well, is when you're talking about the brightest possible representation of a pure color, QD OLED is superior to WOLED because it's not washed out by that white subpixel when it's trying to achieve that level of brightness. Red is just the red subpixel going full bore, baby. Not red with some a little bit of white in there. Let me just sneak a little bit of white in there.
Trying to mix things.
And so it's not about superior or inferior even necessarily. It's about understanding what the fuck I'm buying. And my understanding when I was buying a Samsung TV was I was getting, if it was OLED, I was getting QD OLED. And Samsung has marketed it really heavily. So for them to do this about face so that they can, not make their WOLED panel-based TVs look too bad is really frustrating. Like, by all means, have WOLED panels, but just tell me that's what it is. And market it as such, because they're not the same thing. Creating confusion so that it basically amounts to creating confusion. It's intentional. It's not like this is accidental, oopsie daisy.
Like at this point, why did you even make white OLED?
Well, because LG Display, if they stop running the fabs, is basically like lahooped. And so if I had to guess, I would say it's because LG Display needs to sell panels. Samsung Electronics moves a lot of TVs. And so they've done a deal to move LG panels. And as part of that business arrangement, this kind of makes sense. There's a combination of what's being reported here, which is that LG has asked, hey, respectfully, if you're going to buy our product, don't take a big fucking dump on it in your marketing, right? So part of it is that. And another part of it is that from Samsung Electronics' standpoint, they're sitting here going, well, if we just market everything OLED as OLED, and we're getting a deal from Life's Desperate over there, hey, LG has spent the last 8 years hyping OLED. Why don't we just stop talking about the differences in the different kinds of OLED, and we can take these discount OLED panels, position them, right alongside ours, charge a premium price for the display, and hey, no one's the wiser. Yeah. So Samsung Electronics has their own incentive for not positioning QD OLED as that much better than WOLED, because you got to understand Samsung Display, Samsung Electronics, yes, they're definitely related and they definitely, co-benefit each other. But Samsung Electronics has to buy panels from Samsung Display, and it's in their best interest to take as much of the margin of that finished product away from Samsung Display and into Samsung Electronics, because that makes them look good. Mm-hmm. And they don't ultimately care nearly as much about how Samsung Display looks. So if they can use LG Display to put pressure on Samsung Display so that they can get better deals across the board, they're going to do that, regardless of whether LG, please asks them not to make WOLED look bad. So there's a whole complicated dynamic at play here. But at the end of the day, it's all about making money, and none of it is about helping consumers understand what the fuck they're buying. And that's what I don't like. There. And none of this is a tax write-off. Stop. Although there are plenty of tax incentives and tax write-offs in the operation of their businesses, I'm sure.
I'm sure lots. Yeah.
I mean, especially in
the fab.
South Korea.
Yeah.
Like the whole, the government and the big companies thing is, well, it's something.
It sure is.